How's everybody doing? I really appreciate everybody joining me today. Just pin my man here. All right, see, live got some new things going on here. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. Today we're talking to good friend of mine, Aaren Snyder, who wrote My Black Mental Health Matters. I'm sorry, Black Mental Health Matters, not My Black Mental Health. Everybody's Black Mental Health Matters. The ultimate guide for mental health awareness in the Black community. Now, we have spoken with him one time before, about the book. We're going to continue that conversation today. We'll also talk about some new work that he has on the way as well. We always start off with letting you know what book I'm reading currently and what I'll be reading next. Right now, I'm still reading Colson Whitehead, The Underground Railroad. This book has really caused me to start looking into what we consider as fiction, right? Because this is an historical fiction book, but there are a lot of aspects to the book that ring really, really true. And it made me look into who classifies books as fiction, what makes certain books be classified as fiction, and I'll have some more work on that in the near future. I am on page 137. There's about 300 pages in the book total, so I'm less than halfway. Yeah, it's about 295, about 302 pages, so I'm less than halfway. It's an amazing book. I wish I could just read it all the way through. I'm not a speed reader like everybody knows, but it's a really, really good book. One book that I'll be reading next is I need to read a light book, to be honest with you, because this Colson Whitehead, The Underground Railroad, is a pretty heavy book. Even though it is fiction, it really kind of paints the picture of the middle ground where we talk about slavery and freedom. We talk about people escaping slavery, right? I think to me, in my mind, I just had the person being enslaved and then them escaping and being happy and excited to have escaped slavery. And I didn't think about the middle ground and the different emotions and the fact that I know Colson Whitehead has one section in the book that really spoke to me about the main character is a lady named Cora and Caesar. They both escaped from the plantation together. And Cora says something that really hit me when she said that when they escaped, they thought they escaped being somebody's property. They thought they escaped the reality of being kept in a house like cattle. And with the house that they were in South Carolina, she felt they were still held like cattle. And instead of being a white man's property, they were now the property of a number of different people. And so it really struck me where, I just went from enslavement to kind of jubilation of when somebody escapes from the hells of slavery. And I didn't think about the journey, right? The journey from going from the plantation and finally escaping to freedom. I just didn't think about the different personalities that they would interact with and the different levels of evil that somebody would have to deal with, right? When you just think about an enslaver and then somebody who believes in your freedom, but you don't think about I didn't think about the middle ground and the different people in between these two polar opposites, right? So this book really paints that picture for me personally. I'd suggest it to anybody, but I would tell them it's a heavy read. I know the first time that I posted it, somebody spoke to me and said, hey, while you're reading this book, make sure you're watching comedy shows, or make sure that you're that you don't let it weigh on you too much, because it is a heavy book. So this is the book I'm reading right now. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring my man Aaren Snyder on here so we can talk to him about Black Mental Health Matters and the different things that he's working on currently. Um, Y'all know I'm country, so I clap. What's going on, good brother?
What's going on, bro? You all right?
I'm all right. It's Sunday. Can't complain on a Sunday.
I know that's right.
Sunday's the easy living.
Yes, sir.
And my baby's birthday is coming up, so
Oh, yeah. How old?
he's about to be 7.
Okay, that's what's up. I know it's about to be a good turn up going on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's 7 going on about 25 because he think everybody in this house is boss. So we'll get some more of that, I guess. He's the baby in the house, but he bosses everybody around.
Yeah, I know that my son the same way. He's sick.
I don't know where they get it from, but you gotta love it.
Oh, yeah, I know, man. You gotta love it.
So how you been, brother?
I've been good, man. I can't complain. I'm moving back to Detroit. I was living in Ohio for the past 6 years, so now I'm moving back to Detroit, starting a new job. New all type of new stuff going on right now, but more importantly, I'm working on a new journal. We're gonna get into that. And I'm doing a bunch of blog posts and whatnot. Just staying on the grind, man, trying to put the word out here about Black mental health.
I understand. Yeah, we'll definitely get on that real soon. So, just for the people who don't know, just kind of introduce yourself briefly for me.
Well, I am Aaren Snyder. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work currently out of Detroit, Michigan. I am an author of Black Mental Health Matters, the ultimate guide for mental health awareness in the Black community. I wrote that book in 2020. It did phenomenal internationally. People from the UK bought the book, people from Canada, people all over the United States. I run several blogs. I contribute to a blog called Blavity. And I also write my own blog, mentalhealthmatters.com, or you can go to aarensnyderlmft.com and look at my blog work. Got a few courses coming up. Um, and that's pretty much it, man. Advocating for Black people and Black mental health, and really just trying to shed the light on some of the issues that go on in our community outside of the scope of mental health as well.
Yeah, and you've been working.
Yeah, man. I've been putting in some work, bro.
I see you. I see you. So, about the Black Mental Health Matters book,
Yeah.
like we spoke about before,
Mm-hmm.
I think probably really soon after you released the book,
Yeah.
I had just happened to be online one day,
Mm-hmm.
and I promise you, just the book just came out to me. I don't know, these phones,
Yeah.
they know what you're thinking. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But I just saw the title of it, and I just had to buy it and read it because at that time, it was the middle of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of our mental health was struggling.
Yeah.
And I had never read a book about mental health, right? That's not a conversation that I had in my house or in the house that I grew up in.
Right.
So kind of speak to writing a mental health book that focuses on Black people and some of the challenges that you had while putting it together.
Yeah, I think what you said resonates with a lot of people. Most people never read a book about mental health, let alone a Black mental health book. So those people who trying to find a mental health book, 9 out of 10 times it's not going to really resonate with their struggles. I mean, everybody experiences mental health in the same way, but they experience it in different ways at the same time. And that's usually based on culture. There's not a lot of resources surrounding our culture specifically when it comes to anything, let alone mental health. So me being a Black therapist working amongst Black people, I felt like it was best to write a book that specifically caters to Black culture, that talks about the struggles of growing up in the inner city, or or some of the most uncommon aspects of mental illnesses that people probably would just sweep under the rug, and that look different for Black people than it do for other groups of people sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
Right. So about how long did it take you to put the book together?
It took me about, I say, 6 months, but you know, the material from the book spans over my entire career as a therapist. You know, I'm talking about stuff that happened years ago, and I'm mashing it all the way into just one book. You know what I'm saying? So it's really a collection of my entire career, but specifically, it took me 6 months to write that book, though.
Okay. And you said, you've been getting feedback from all over in the UK and everything like that. So how's the feedback been?
Well, you know, it's kind of humbling, you know, to see people from all over the country, I mean, the world, you know, hitting me up saying that this book resonated with them, that they identified with some of the stuff that I was talking about in the book, and you know, this was the only book that really ever resonated with them. Was just like, it was humbling, man. Like, I never thought people all the way in the UK or Canada or even India would be reading something I wrote, you know. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah, I mean, when I first read it, and words like, with a lot of words like trauma,
Mm-hmm.
traumatic stress, things like that, we see those online, right? But I never knew just the definition of it. And I always thought, like, I remember I read in the book, and I spoke to you about how as Black people, we sometimes normalize trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we just think it's just how it is. It's
Right.
just what happens when you grow up. So kind of just speak to the real definition of trauma and some ways that can play out.
Yeah. Well, trauma really, you know, to sum it up, it's the situation that overwhelms the brain's ability to cope. You know, most of the time we have situations where we fairly easily cope with them. You know, you get into an argument or a fight or whatever, you tend to be able to bounce right back. But trauma is a situation that sticks with you beyond, you know, that day or that moment. That's trauma. And trauma is what trauma does. A lot of times people think trauma is only like rape or witnessing a murder or something that serious, but trauma could really be anything that overwhelms your ability to cope with it. So for a lot of people in the Black community, though, trauma plays out, like you were saying, in ways that we typically normalize. Like, you know, you hear about somebody getting killed. You know, that's a traumatic thing. Just to hear about it is traumatic. But amongst our community, you know, sometimes people go even as far as to praise people out here shooting and robbing and selling dope. But those are traumatic situations. So I wanted to talk about that in the book. I wanted to talk about trauma and, you know, sexual trauma, that people don't really find themselves, they don't find the strength within themselves to talk about those things. So trauma in the Black community not only is overlooked, at times we can become so much of a victim to it that we tend to praise it. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of times I know growing up in my house, it was, what happens in this house stays in this house.
Yeah.
So it was never hey, let's go talk to a professional about trauma. Let's go talk about, seeing something that you saw at school, something you saw outside. Let's go talk to somebody about it. It was, hey, what happens here stays here. We talk about it and you just kind of move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, and I think a lot of people do that because there's a certain distrust that comes from professional people, especially those in the mental health realm. Because usually, when you got to see a therapist, it's something punitive in the Black community. Like, it ain't, you know, you just don't go in there to process some emotions. You go in there on the other side of a court hearing, or you got reprimanded in school, or it's divorce counseling, or something along those lines. It's never really to help you. It's just kind of like something that's an add-on for some dealings with the system. So a lot of people are very distrustful for therapists. Even myself, a Black therapist, they be looking at me like, man, you must be some type of Uncle Tom or something. Why are you doing this type of career? You know, and the truth of the matter is, it's just that we haven't been exposed to people within the profession that really understand it, that really come from the culture. You know, we need more people like that in the profession to open up the door or to elevate this conversation surrounding mental health in our community.
Definitely. And, that's why I say in my opinion, you're a revolutionary person because you're speaking in our vernacular, right? You're speaking from our culture about mental health. And the book comes off very non-judgmental. It's very, hey, I understand you didn't speak to somebody before.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, I understand you might have seen this, this, and this. Let me explain to you why that's trauma. Instead of being, hey, you saw this, why didn't you go see help?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So was that intentional for you to kind of have a more of an understanding approach to the book?
Absolutely, that was 100% intentional because a lot of times, people in professional spheres, they tend to separate themselves from the common lay person. You know what I mean? They tend to, use a lot of big words and they throw their degree around, and that turn people off. Like, you don't want to go talk to no therapist and he talking like he and speaking the Queen's English or anything. Like, you want somebody that you can identify with, and they identify with you, they understand. When you have somebody that understand you, they dress like you, they talk like you get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, that facilitates good therapy. So that's always been my idea behind therapy, as well as writing a book, to be a man of the culture, be somebody that everybody can be comfortable with, rather than trying to flex my degrees or whatnot.
And has that always been comfortable for you? Like, I know in professional settings, sometimes it's hard to let people know that you're of a certain culture. Has that always been like easy for you as a therapist?
Nope. I ain't even gonna lie to you. No, not at all. Like at first I would come in and I would try to be somebody that I wasn't. And it was like I was going against the grain. Like I wouldn't be helping these people really. But then after I started to realize me being myself is more helpful than anything, just being somebody that's from the community, from the culture, that's helping you. That's when you start to get to the deep issues, because they feel comfortable talking to you. If you ain't being yourself to at least a certain extent, a lot of times people gonna come in there and they gonna one word answer you to death. They gonna be yes, no, yeah. No, we ain't gonna get nowhere in this therapy session, and we damn sure ain't gonna get nowhere if I'm writing a book talking like that. So my job, I felt like once I realized that, was to bring myself and my profession together and bring it to the client so I can help them more efficiently.
Okay. And it's interesting that you said a lot of times our first interaction with a licensed professional is in a negative
Mm-hmm.
sense. First time I spoke to it, first time I spoke to a counselor was a school counselor because I was in trouble.
Right.
Right. And then so after that, it built off of that. Every time I would hear about a professional psychiatrist, it was, oh, somebody's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm from the era where, my uncles and things like that, you put them in the back room with grandma at grandma's house, and they're there, and there's no gradual, I don't want to say getting better, but there's no help being sought,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's either drowned out by either just prayer, which I'm not against, but has to be action behind that. And then it's just, you just talk about it, right? Have you noticed things getting better in the Black community as far as mental health conversations, at least?
Yeah, I have. I think that, a lot of these people that's talking about mental health is really pushing the envelope, making it okay for everybody else to talk about it. Because, years ago, not even in just the broader community, but especially not in the Black community, wasn't nobody talking about anxiety or trauma or depression. But once you hear Charlamagne talking about it, and you hear Taraji P. Henson talking about it, and you hear all these different rappers and stuff talking about it, now that put the battery in everybody else back to say, okay, it's cool to have these conversations. So I do think we came a long way, because when I first started, wasn't nobody talking about no mental health. Well, nobody's talking about it, so now it's just kind of a part of everyday conversation, So I definitely think we came a long, long, long way when it comes to that conversation.
I think so too. I talked to my younger cousin, and she's using words like, anxiety. If she's
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm leaving work because my anxiety's acting up, or I'm getting away from this topic because my anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was, 25, 26, those words were not being used.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I definitely think that the younger people are doing a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Tony Thomason from UK. I'd like to purchase. Okay, we can get you that book, no problem at all.
BlackBookClub.com. Is that the website, BlackBookClub.com? Because I know you had got a few copies.
Yeah, blackbookclub.net. I need to get some more copies.
Okay, yeah.
Because, in a quick story, I was vending at an event,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody comes up to me. He had a friend with him, And he's like, get this book right here. He's pointing at Black Mental Health Matters. He's like, get this one, get this one, get this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spoke to him. I said, I didn't recognize it. I said, have you read that book before? He's like, man, my mom got this book for me from you like 3 months ago. And I read it all. And I'm telling my friend he's got to get it. He can't borrow mine. He's got to pick it up. And the other guy was like, well, what's it, why you want me to read it? He's like, man, trust me, man, we got things we got to work out. He's like 20, 21 years old.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, we got stress we got to work out. We got anxiety we got to work out. He's like, this is the book you need. It's going to talk to you exactly how you need somebody to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
So your book is affecting people. I can say that. I know it affected me, and it's affecting other people as well.
Man, that's dope, man. That's what I wanted to hear. When I wrote it, that was my intention. You know what I mean? That's what I sought to do because I knew it wasn't nothing else out there. You know what I mean? Like, a few people have come around that time when I came, and I'm certain a few people going to come afterwards, which is what I want. But at the time, it wasn't no Black mental health books, that specifically addressed mental illness. Like, we use that as a dirty word, mental illness. Black people have illnesses, that's common, what I'm saying? So I wanted to break the mold. And I've noticed a lot of people say the same thing my man said, that, this is something that's speaking to me, and I'm just so proud and happy that I was a part of something that's speaking to other people.
Yeah. And, I ended up talking to him for about 30, 35 minutes, and he's like, I didn't know what I was going through. Like he had something personal going on in his life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it was affecting people around me. I didn't know my mom noticed the difference in me.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I was just trying to figure it out, like a lot of us end up doing.
Oh, yeah.
We just lock ourselves away and kind of box ourselves in and say, okay, I'll figure it out. But we don't understand it's affecting everybody around us.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was happening with me. What I was just saying, okay, I'll figure it out. I'll think through it. I'll go here and I'll just figure it out. But I'm not considering the fact that I'm coming home and my kids are looking at me like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
I'll figure it out. But one day turns into 2 days. 2 days turns into 2 weeks. And then your family's worried about you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he said his mom picked the book up for him and just said, hey, I picked this book up at an event. Check it out. And he's like, I didn't read books like that. He's like, I'm not a heavy book reader.
Mm-hmm.
I got that book. My mom gave it to me, so I read it. He's like, I see things completely different now. He's going to see a professional. So, yeah, I know it changed his life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's the intent, man. That's what it's all about. I wanted to change lives because, it's a lot of mental health material. Well, it ain't even a lot of mental health material, but it's mental health material, but it ain't too much that specifically speaks to us. And that's the same with a lot of different things. We got 95 channels on TV, maybe 1, 2 of them are dedicated to Black people. We got 100 radio stations. Maybe you got to keep searching to find the Black radio station, right? So mental health is something that affects everyone, but you got to comb the ends of the earth. You know what I mean? You got to search through everything just to find something. So I wanted to be an extra resource, and that's kind of what got me into writing a journal, though, because, I remember me and you had some conversations, and journaling is powerful, right? But the problem is a lot of times people journal, but they don't really do it effectively, So I wanted to be a guide to help guide people in writing those journals effectively. So that's what the next book is. It's just a structural journal. It takes what we learned in Black Mental Health Matters, the Ultimate Guide for Mental Health Awareness, which awareness is cool, but what we do with that awareness. And the next one is the journal. The journal shows you what to do when you have these problems and how to talk about it.
Like, I remember I reached out to you after I read it, and I said, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
You said, journal. He's like, I know you'll feel goofy or whatever when you first start doing it, but just stick with it, and I can speak from experience. It definitely really, really helps. Like you said, you have awareness, but then what's the action behind it?
Right.
So just kind of speak in more detail about the journaling book you have coming.
Well, the journal is basically a 45-day journey to which I take the reader through. Well, we're talking about self-awareness in the first part of the journal. The journal is split up in 3 sections. The second part is how to utilize certain coping skills to expound on your self-awareness. And then the third part is where I'm going to let the reader journal freely, but I'm going to still give points and prompts to to focus in on what it is that they're journaling about. So each day in the 45-day journey is going to focus on a different issue. So it may one time it might focus on childhood trauma. The next day may focus on insecurities. The next day may focus on let's say depression or anxiety. Each day is going to focus on something different all the way up until day 45.
Okay. And what are some of the advantages to journaling?
Well, journaling is got so many advantages, but some of the main ones that really stick out to me is that it helps you make your thoughts more concrete. It brings awareness to what you're thinking because, you know, we think thousands of thoughts per day and those thoughts come and go, but the effects of those thoughts stick with you. Like you might be insecure about something. You might not be actively insecure about it at the moment, but your actions based on that underlying thought stick with you well beyond that thought being conscious in your mind, right? So when you journal, you write that thought down and you look at it at a later time when you in a more stable mind and you realize how insufficient, how inaccurate those thoughts were because it's concrete, it's on paper, it's not just a passing thought. So when you do that, you are able to more so stabilize your thinking because you're looking at it in real time rather than just dealing with the emotional component that goes with that thought.
Yeah, and one thing I can speak to is it helps you to kind of trace your triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll go back and you'll look at it and you'll say, okay, all right, I was feeling that, and then this, and this happened.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now I see when I have this type of feeling, I need to react this way to control it. Not to ignore it, but just to accept it and then control it so that it doesn't take you on a long, I know our thoughts can sometimes take us on a long journey.
Yeah.
And sometimes those journeys are not as bright as we want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was beautiful, man. You 100% right. It helps you trace your thoughts. It really it's a recorder for your thoughts because a lot of times we be thinking certain things and we forget all about it, but the behaviors that we do behind us that we didn't forget about that. So we behaving in a certain way and we don't really know why. But when you got that journal, you can look back and say, okay, on June, this is why I did such and such. You know what I mean? June 15th. Okay. So I know I was triggered by that on that day. So next time when that situation come up, you know what to do differently. Whereas when you just got it all in your head, you don't really know what your actual frame of mind was on this day when you had an argument with your wife or you yelled at your son or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep. And sometimes you can go back and read the journal. You're like, I was really tripping.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You're like, wow.
Wait a minute. And that disempowers those type of thoughts moving forward. You see what I'm saying? Because now you looking at it and you seeing how, I won't say ridiculous, but how dysfunctional that thinking was. And now it disempowers it because you're actually seeing it from almost a third person perspective rather than just being locked in your mind.
And so with with us being in about this year 3 of a pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
Try to speak to the impacts of the pandemic on our mental health. Like, what have you seen as far as a pattern?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the main things that I've seen is that we've normalized seclusion. Being quarantined and things of that nature. It's normalized, and it's a social distance, and literally to a certain extent, like a lot of people ain't seeing a family like that. They're not going to social gatherings like that because they're living in a consistent or a long-term state of anxiety, and that's not only affecting you from a physical health standpoint, it's affecting your mental health because if you got to worry about getting sick everywhere you go, imagine what that's really doing to you subconsciously. So definitely this pandemic has shown us a lot. And then, in the early parts of the pandemic, I don't know if you noticed it, but it was kind of like an uptick in like police involved shootings and things of that nature. And us just being at home and the TV and the internet was really all we could turn to. We seeing this stuff every day, and you just dealing with all these different stressors at once. So definitely, I think that was onset by the pandemic. Those upticks in police shooting, and then you're seeing this secondhand trauma in so many different areas, and not really knowing how to process it. I think that was probably one of the hugest reasons why George Floyd's incident was so big, because everybody got to see it. Usually you scrolling and you see it and you done, but everybody at home witnessing this, and it was very heinous anyway. But I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that.
I think so too, because like you said, everybody was at home, so we all had just that time to process the loss of life, right? If you're in the hustle and bustle, you got to get to work, you have to do this, you have to do that. Sometimes you can you end up not ignoring, but not being able to process the feeling of shock and trauma of seeing these police involved shootings and seeing this loss of life.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like, I think the gravity of the situation became much more severe when you at home and you there with your thoughts all day. Like, you're not in the hustle and bustle. Like, you seeing this unfold every step of the way. You seeing the situation itself. You seeing the coverage on the news. You seeing all the protests. Like, you following it. You're not doing nothing else but being at home. So I think the pandemic really affected us in a vicariously trauma type of way, more so than any other period.
I think so too. Yeah. I know the book really helped me during the pandemic to understand, because I was in a constant state of just shock and anticipating negativity, right? Like, I was anticipating getting sick every time I opened the door.
Yeah.
And the book helped me to just kind of put a name to it and understand that my thoughts are showing through my actions, right? I'm putting 2 pairs of gloves on to go check the mail. I'm doing this, that, and third. And I don't want to say traumatizing, but I'm scaring my children because now, they're afraid to go outside the house too. And I thought it was normal. I thought I'd just figure it out. And the book just really helped me and the journaling helped me to just understand, like, okay, I'm triggered by this, and this thought. So if I get a thought, let's control a thought so that it doesn't turn to B, C, D, E, and then we end up in a cycle of these thoughts.
Absolutely, man. I think you used the book perfectly. The main purpose of the book is to gain awareness. Because a lot of us think these uncomfortable or unfortunate situations that occur are just normal, and to a certain extent they are normal, but they aren't something to be ignored. They are things that can be challenged and defeated, and a lot of times we just roll with the punches when we have mental health issues. We don't even recognize them as such. We just think that it's just a regular part of life. Trauma is not normal. Anxiety it's normal, but it's not something that you just can throw your hands up at. It's something that can be addressed. It's something that should be addressed. And Black people deserve to know how to address that in ways that are relevant to them.
Yeah, and I know that was one of the first things you told me, is that trauma is not normal, right? And I know a lot of times, and especially in the Black community, we'll have a tendency to, I think it's a trauma response, is that we'll make a joke out of a lot of things to try to just get through it. So we'll end up joking about our trauma so much. I lost my mans.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, that was my bad. Somebody had a live and I accidentally clicked it.
Oh, no, you good. And so we'll end up kind of joking about our trauma so much that we'll end up trying to normalize it, right? So that we don't make ourselves into a victim.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, we normalize and downplay and joke on so much stuff, and then it's like, there's a certain part of this normalizing of Black culture that is really disturbing to me right now. I don't know if you too familiar about it, but a lot of people are normalizing death amongst other black people. Like, you know, they saying they smoking ops and, you know, and they laughing at people that's getting killed. And I think that that is a trauma response by definition. Like, I think that that is probably one of the most highlighted trauma responses I'm seeing in this generation. And I think that we as black people, we have to stop accepting trauma as the norm. Like that's what we've been doing forever, accepting trauma. You know, slavery, slave movies, shootings, killings, drug dealings. Like it's to the point where we praise these things because it's just so normal within our community. And if we don't come to terms with that, we as black people, we don't deserve this, and we deserve better. We'll continue this and wonder why we in the same predicament 10, 15, 20, 100 years down the line. We got to start feeling better about ourselves, thinking better about ourselves. And that starts with addressing the trauma in a productive way.
Definitely. And like, I know you mentioned about seeing people normalizing young death too, right? These are people that are, King Von was what, 25 years old.
Yeah.
And people are saying they're smoking these people and all this type of stuff. And I'm from Indiana, so I have like family members from Chicago. And I've talked to them about it. And they're like, that's just how it is here. And like you said, it's just normalizing it, right?
Yeah.
So I know I had a friend of mine who was born and raised in Chicago. And when the whole thing happened, I called him. I was like, man, that's a shame. King Von was only in his 20s. He was like, yeah, he was 25. He lived to be 25. And so he wasn't shocked about the death, right? He was like, yeah, hey, he was more shocked that he lived to 25 than that he died at 25.
And that's terrible, man. And that's terrible that the life expectancy of a young black man in the inner city is 25, if even that. To think that somebody living to 25 is a long life lived, that's terrible, And what's crazy is that a lot of these young kids, they idolize people who are destroying other black lives. They idolize the shooters. They idolize the drug dealers. Like that is trauma. That's trauma, and it's not a healthy way of thinking, and it's not good to even acknowledge those things in that way. And I think that we as black men, the leaders of the culture, we have to start educating our young kings to let them know that it's more to life than being somebody who is exterminating black people. Like that's not an accomplishment.
Yeah. And I know like I've had conversations, and a lot of it is like you said, that accepting it and wanting more and not understanding that life is not all about that and that we can do more. I know a lot of times these kids, they're told that the only thing they can be is a gang member,
right?
Or the highest, and then so they join into that because of the culture and the environment, and they're told the best thing they can do is be the best gang member they can be. So then they start to praise the shooters and the drug dealers and things like that. And it's really disheartening to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's terrible, and it's just kind of creating a cycle because it's not only is it dysfunctional in the first place to praise these people, but the people who they see getting the quote unquote clout is the people who doing these things. So that makes someone aspire to do these things. And when we trace that issue all the way back, it's rooted in oppression, and oppression brings about trauma. And nobody is never really dealing with the trauma at the grassroots level, in the childhood and the adolescence and the young adulthood. Nobody's dealing with those things. So of course they're going to manifest in dysfunctional ways, and we have to really be a part of that charge to change the way that people are looking at things, and that takes the Charlemagne's of the world and the Taraji P. Henson's of the world and all these other people that are advocating black mental health right now. I think that they are doing God's work, in my opinion, because right now we need people who are going to make a change in terms of the way we as black people see ourselves.
Yeah, and it's so important that, like you said, people like Charlemagne and Taraji P. Henson are doing this now, because a lot of times you have to have that attention on you, right? You have to have, so these are two very big names. So for them to take the time out I know Taraji had an app where you could find free mental health
Yeah.
help. And so when they have this attention on, they're using that attention to speak to the younger generation and tell them that, hey, because a lot of times when you're younger, being cool is what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And you can speak to say, taking care of your mental health is cool.
Yeah.
It's healthy. Healthy is cool. These things matter so much, especially to the young mind. And it helps them. Like you said, we've seen the improvements in the younger generation where they will openly talk about these things.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm just so proud to see some of these young folks who normalize going to therapy. They normalize taking medication if they need it. They normalize doing the necessary work to resolve these inner issues that they may have, because what it does is it sets a precedence for the next generation. And before you know it, the normalized behavior will be to take care of your mental health when you need it. And, a lot of times people was, saying we could pray it away, and I understand that, I'm not against religion or anything like that, but at the same time, you have to have action along with your prayers, So I definitely think that this conversation that we're moving towards about elevating mental health is really helpful to our community.
It definitely is. But 1 second, I'm sorry, 1 second.
Are you good, bro?
Come here. Since you're not coming to do it, now you gotta come say hi to everybody. This is the birthday boy Tyson right here.
What's going on, Tyson? You all right? Happy
So
birthday.
this night we wrote this book.
Happy birthday, young king.
Say thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye. So one question I received in my inbox is, can you have Mr. Snyder define what imposter syndrome is?
Yeah, I can define that. Imposter syndrome, first and foremost, is a fallacy. There's no such thing as an imposter when it comes to being yourself. But imposter syndrome, from just my definition of it, is where someone enters a certain stage of their life and they don't believe that they deserve to be there. So maybe that might be somebody working in a professional position that feels that they somehow swindled their way into it, or maybe somebody in a relationship believing that they're not the person that their partner fell in love with. They're falling in love with a certain image that does not fit them. So to me, imposter syndrome is just basically somebody believing that they're faking their way into where they are currently in life.
Yeah. I know I've dealt with that before, with just being a married father of two. Just I never envisioned that to be the future for me. So I never looked at it. Like I never saw a wedding, or like some people would plan a wedding, or I'm gonna name my children this. I'm going to be like this with my kids. I never had these thoughts. And when my child was born and then I got married, I would have those moments where I'm like, this isn't me. Like, my son thinks I'm somebody different than I am. Or, my wife married somebody who is not really who I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What are some of the ways that to kind of work through imposter syndrome, if it can be worked through?
It definitely can be worked through. I've dealt with it myself, being a professional Black man. I come from the inner city. I ain't no, what I mean? Like, I'm not no scholar or professional person in my mind, you know what I mean? But I think one of the ways to work through it is to understand basically what I was saying earlier, is that there is no such thing as an imposter. Every single person walking this earth is a unique individual, and you determine who you are. There's no certain way to be a therapist. There's no certain way to be a father. There's no certain way to be a husband. There's no certain way to be a teacher. Every single teacher you ever ran across, every single father you ever ran across were unique. So how can you be an imposter at something that's specifically crafted for you? So that's one way that I would deal with the imposter syndrome. And another way is to take it to a more concrete standpoint. What I mean by that is look at the the measurements or the requirements that exist for that particular position, or whatever it is that your imposter syndrome is based on, right? So if
Right.
the measurements or the criteria to be, let's put it in my example, a therapist, is that you have to have at least a master's degree. You have to go through getting your license accreditations. You have to see a certain amount of clients. If you're doing all those things, then how can you be an imposter? You're putting it and making it more tangible so that it's not based on your opinion. It's not subjective anymore. You're looking at it from a concrete standpoint, and that takes some of the power away from looking at it as if it's something that you're not, because you're showing yourself that, hey, I got X, Y, and Z under my belt. Ain't no way that I'm an imposter.
Right. And I like you spoke about your job, right?
Yeah.
I know I had received like a promotion a couple jobs ago, and I had those moments where people were looking at me for answers, and I'm like, man, I don't know why y'all looking at me. You know what I mean? I don't know why y'all looking at me. I didn't get all the A's in school. I didn't do this. But like you said, I had to remind myself, I do have this amount of years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I have been put in this position by somebody who knows what they're doing. So if they think I know what I'm doing, then maybe I'm all right.
Right. There you go. And that's so hard for us to process, because that's a trauma response. Somebody along the lines told you that you wasn't what you are today. You know what I mean? And we subconsciously, or even sometimes consciously, internalize those negative messages that we get from other people. We have to really process and work through that. That whoever somebody said that I was, that ain't me. I know me better than anybody. You know what I mean? Or I'm not as bad as I like to believe that I am. We have to learn to deviate away from the negative perceptions of ourselves and determine who we really gonna be moving forward.
Right. And we have to understand, one thing I always preach, especially to black men, is that we have to understand the power of change.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just because you were something a year ago, 5 minutes ago, that doesn't mean that's how you have to be all your life.
Exactly.
Right? We got to understand that if you decide that you can change, then you have to respect that and honor that. Keep going with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And I'm in awe about some of the stuff you be saying. Like, I'm like, is you a therapist, bro? Because you be spitting some knowledge, and that's so true. One of the things that I've really learned over time is that we hold ourselves to unfair double standards. A lot of times we judge ourselves much more harshly than we would judge somebody else in the same predicament. And also, it's not fair to judge yourself today at whatever age you are based on your 20-year-old self or your 18-year-old self, because you've learned and grown so much since that period of time, but yet we still holding ourselves to that same standard that we hold ourselves to way back then. That's unfair to ourselves. So you got to be more compassionate with yourself so that you can work through these issues.
Exactly. And so, getting back to the new book coming out. I'm sorry I didn't hit on these questions before, but when is that? When is the journal coming out?
Well, right now I'm trying to figure out a specific date, but it will be in April for sure. Once I figure out the specific date, I'll post it, but I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely coming soon. So everybody stay tuned. If you want to figure out if you want to find out when the book is, just sign on to my page, follow me, and I'll definitely have some updates within the next few days or so.
All right, beautiful. And I have his page pinned right here, so you can just click that and follow him. Because I know I'm getting the journal book without a question about it. Because like you said, the awareness is first, and then the action comes after that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to prioritize our mental health. Yep. Because let's face it, black people everywhere, we have a certain level of trauma that we all have to unpack and deal with.
Yeah, that just come with the territory, bro. Like just living that every day as a black person is trauma. You could walk out your door and see trauma. You could go to a job interview and see trauma. And a lot of times we just normalize it so much because it's been happening to us for so long. And it's just normal. Everybody we know going through this. So we don't really even unpack that stuff, and we just carry it with us throughout our life journey, you know. So we definitely got to become masters at unpacking trauma, because trauma is hitting us in every direction we turn.
Every direction. And, you know, a lot of times we're still dealing with some trauma from slavery.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And you put that into what we're going on our day-to-day life, it's trauma on top of trauma that we're having to unpack and deal with,
that's
so that we don't pass it on to the babies.
that's facts, man.
They have their own set of trauma they're gonna have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Everybody, you can't get through life unscathed from trauma. Like, everybody gonna experience it, but the difference is what you gonna do once you experience it. Is you gonna even know that it's trauma when you see it? How are you gonna respond to that trauma in ways that are not dysfunctional? And unfortunately, in our community, we have been alienated from resources that help us when it comes to anything, and trauma is no exception. So if we don't have the tools to deal with these traumas, we're going to be the most dysfunctional people when it comes to trauma. So we got to start giving these people the game so they know what to do with it.
Exactly. You know, because I always go back to it. You know, when we were young, it was just therapy was not even discussed.
Mm-mm.
You know, it wasn't, unless it was, like you said, court ordered to stay out of jail, or ordered by the school because they think you're quote unquote crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we just shied away from it in our adult lives.
Yeah, that's facts. That's facts. A lot of people believe that to this day. You know, like, they ain't going to therapy. There ain't nothing wrong with me. Why am I go to therapy? You know, but nothing has to be wrong with you to go to therapy. No more than something has to be wrong with you to go to the doctor. You just go to maintain your body. And therapy or mental health treatment, whatever the case may be, you do that to maintain a healthy mind.
Right. And it's more important now than, well, in my opinion, it's more important that we put words to these, you know, put actions to these words, or we put actions to the awareness of post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you see it in just day-to-day conversations with people, where you'll see how, you know, like myself, I can't sit in a dining in a restaurant with my back to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife would be like, "Why is that?" I don't know. It's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would be the first one, like, that's a trauma response. Something happened to make you do that. So you need to, not that you have to change it or it's a shame. She's like, you just need to understand what these reactions come from.
Facts. Yeah, that's facts. You know, and sometimes it be something so deeply rooted in your mind that you don't even really understand why you're doing it. You just do it. You know, and that's where the journal come in, you know, because you could probably trace it back if you had the journal. You know what I mean? Like, why do I feel the need to sit with my back to the wall so I can see everybody walking in? Okay, you know, 3 years ago I had a situation where a dude walked in and sucker punched somebody. Or you never know what the case may be. But the point is that we definitely, as Black men, Black women as well, we have a lot of underlying trauma that we do not respond to in appropriate ways, and you know, I just want to be a part of that change.
And you know, one thing you just spoke about is the trauma does not have to directly happen to you.
That's fair.
You know, like you said, you can be in a restaurant, see somebody hit somebody else, and internalize that because you're saying, I'm not letting anybody hit me like that. Mm-hmm. So now you're acting different because of something you saw. It doesn't necessarily have to happen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can do the behavior to protect yourself for so long that you really forget the initial reason why you started thinking that way or why you started to do that way. And that's typically how trauma works. You know, something happens, the conscious memory of that trauma goes away, but the things you do to protect yourself from experiencing that situation, you continue to do it for so long that you really forget the initial thing that started it in the first place.
Yeah, and I know you spoke about, you had an analogy in the book about, you know, hearing about somebody getting sexually assaulted can be a traumatic experience. You don't have to be the person, unfortunately, that goes through that traumatic experience. They're traumatized as well. But you hearing about it, you hearing about somebody dying can force you to become, you know, have post-traumatic stress syndrome as well.
Absolutely. That's called vicarious trauma. And, I think that we as black people, just if you ain't been living under a rock, you've already been traumatized vicariously. Hearing about Emmett Till, hearing about George Floyd, Trayvon Martin. Imagine the level of anxiety that you experience worrying about your own children or your own friends or family or yourself going through those situations for no other reason than being black. So that's a trauma that is perpetual. It never ends, until you do the necessary work. And unfortunately, some of that work has to be done on a government level, on a state level. But as far as being able to process it effectively, is something that we can do within our community.
Exactly. And that's something that, we can and that we really need to, because if we just keep bleeding on each other and we just keep working through trauma on each other, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
We have to, as black men in the community, we have to try to break that cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to be a part of that 100%. Like, I die behind that because I really believe that as black men, in order for us to change this, we got to be the ones to start it. You know what I mean? We got to be the ones to stop bleeding on our families, passing this trauma on. We got to learn to be more stronger emotionally. The only way we can really do that is to become more knowledgeable about the issues that give us problems. We got to be the leaders for our family to be able to express yourself emotionally. If the head of the household can't talk about emotional stuff, how you expect your kids to talk about it? How your wife gonna feel comfortable talking to you about what's on her mind if you can't do it? So we got to be the rock of the family emotionally, but that rock don't necessarily mean that we gotta stonewall everybody. That being the rock mean that we the one that's like Charlemagne and Taraji P. Henson that make it cool within the culture of our family to speak about our problems.
Yeah, and like you said, with our children, right? I find myself like my son's 11 now, so he'll come home some days and he's just not in a good mood, right? He's working through something, and when I was younger, I couldn't tell my mom I'm having a bad day, leave me alone, right? It was like, you must be out your mind. You can't have a bad day,
Right?
Or it'd be like, did you go to work today? No, well, you don't have a bad day.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that, that attitude causes a certain response.
Yeah.
So I have to check myself sometimes and just take a step back and say, okay, son, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? And in order for him to tell me, he has to be able to say, Dad, what's wrong? And I tell him, and then he understands, okay, putting words to your emotions is quote unquote cool or quote unquote macho thing to do. Instead of just saying I'm fine and just avoiding it and then going into a corner and soaking in your own demons and your own bad experiences.
That's 100% right. Speaking about it is the most helpful thing you can do. Is the most strong thing you could do. But we've been conditioned within our culture to believe that that's being weak. But it actually is being strong because a lot of people scared to talk about, trauma. They scared to talk about anxiety or depression or insecurities. So to be able to do that is actually a model of strength more so than it is weakness by far.
Definitely. And that we got to be that change, like you said. And in order to do that, we have to educate ourselves on it. If I read the book, I wouldn't have understood. Hey, okay, he's just in a bad mood. Let's talk about it. Let's sit down. Let's have a discussion about it. And if I can't help, at least you can get a soundboard and speak about your feelings to where in a couple of years, you'll have that emotional intelligence that I lacked at his age.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You're 100% right. We got to be the leaders of changing this culture of not being able to speak about our emotions and be the ones that's teaching our babies and our wives and our children, and our neighbors or whoever the case may be, about being open with talking about your emotions because they're going to be there regardless. You might as well talk about it.
Yeah, they're not going nowhere.
Yeah, they ain't going nowhere. They going.
We see a lot of times we just start, either looking for towards a substance to try to forget about it, or we do some mindless watching on YouTube, playing video games, whatever.
Mm.
But once you turn that game off, those feelings are still there. You just ignore them for an hour, but they're still there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people fall into the patterns of substance abuse because they're looking for a temporary fix to a well, not a permanent, but a long-lasting problem. They're essentially putting a band-aid on a problem that requires surgery, a deep, intensive surgery, and the alcohol or the weed or whatever they might be taking it gives you some temporary relief, but after you come down from that high, you still got them problems.
Yeah, and they're still there. And I know we spoke about how young people that are traumatized, and you see it come out in the music where they're praising some of that substance abuse.
Yeah.
And they're praising the pills or the drink and all this other type of stuff. And it's like they're doing that because they're traumatized, and they're telling you they don't know how to deal with their trauma. Mm-hmm. So they are trying to escape that by using this, and this.
Yeah, it's so true. People self-medicate, and they looking for the same effects that they could get in actual medication, whatever they're being prescribed from their doctor. They're looking for that in weed, in, Percocets, in lean, in,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol or whatever. They're looking for the same effect that they can get from a prescription, and it's actually helping you rather than destroying your body. And sometimes it don't even have to be necessarily a medicine that can help resolve those issues. Certain things like meditation can help, journaling, as we've spoken about so extensively. It's a variety of mental health things that can help you in those situations as opposed to just doing drugs or alcohol or whatever.
Exactly. And I work in HR in my 9 to 5 life.
Yeah.
And where I'll see some of that work its way out is, Black men and women self-medicating because of the traumas that come from white corporate America, right? Having to find your space in corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leaves us in a state where we can't leave our job because we can't take a drug test.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You.
So now we're sitting in that trauma longer. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we can't leave because we can't break the cycle of the substance abuse to go get another job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but that's 100% true. And I've been in that situation. Smoking weed. And you don't want to quit your job because now you got to go somewhere else and try.
Yeah.
Get through those hoops. You imposter syndrome in yourself to a certain extent. You're like, I done slipped up in here. I can't go somewhere else and do it again. So it's definitely a problem within our community dealing with that power structure, self-medicating, and then being stuck within that cycle. I definitely could see how that could even lead to more trauma, more depression, more anxiety, more substance abuse, it could just lead to a whole bunch of different other things for sure.
Yeah, and I've been in that situation where, you're like, okay, I hate my job, but I'm smoking to get over the fact that I hate my job, but I can't leave my job because I'm smoking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then now you're in a cycle of you're mad at yourself because you keep telling yourself you're going to stop, but then you don't.
Yeah.
And so now you're disappointing yourself, and then you're back at work with the trauma, adding that on to being disappointed in yourself. And then you're in a perpetual cycle that you really can't see your way out of.
Exactly. And that just leads to depression. That is a common factor within depression, the hopelessness feeling, just feeling as if there is no foreseeable end to the circumstances that are bothering you at the moment. And, I think that what we just talked about, what we never really talked about this before, is probably so common amongst a lot of people,
Yeah, and it's something I see often. I'll talk to people and I'll say, hey, I got a job paying this much, and it's a substantial pay raise in where they're at now. And I'll have them be honest with them, like, hey, I can't do nothing right now. You got to give me a month, 2 months. And then, and before they can move, because they have to try to clean their system out. Then they're going through the anxiety of quitting a job and taking a new drug test, and they're going through that over and over again, and we normalize. You
Hmm.
know, we think it's normal, but the truth is, it really is.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
So, now I know the journaling book's coming out next month, right?
Yeah,
Now, are you putting some more? You got some more work down the line that you're putting together?
absolutely. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of other books that's gonna be rolling out in 2022. So, I got I ain't gonna speak too much on it right now, but just know I got a couple of them coming out outside of the journal, and even some more journals. So I'm working. I'm working. I'm for the culture. That is one thing that I use as my motivation when I write these books. Not every book will be for the culture, but the ones that I do, they come from things that I have observed as a therapist throughout my time doing this. And I think that those are things that's going to be helpful to people who have been in my predicament, who have been in predicaments of other Black people that I've witnessed or I've treated. So, that's always something at the forefront of my mind when I write my work.
I know, anytime somebody comes to me and either they contact me or if I'm at an event or something and they say, give me two books, and I'll say Black Mental Health Matters, and I'll pick another book as well. But I always pick Black Mental Health Matters, and especially when Black men come. And
Mm-hmm.
they'll ask me, like, why? I'm like, well, this is written from somebody like you. This is written from somebody that you would talk to on the corner
Hmm.
before knowing that he's a therapist.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? I just say, hey, just, flip through it a little bit. And every time they'll say, wow. They'll get to a part that they resonate with that speaks directly to them. And they'll be like, wow, I didn't know a book like this existed.
Hmm.
So I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you went through with writing this book and that you made everything intentional of, being non-judgmental and being for the culture and speaking in our terms, in our words. Like you said, you can throw down that degree and use these, like we call them SAT words,
Yeah.
prove your intelligence, but you're losing the audience in the midst of that.
Yeah. That was my goal, man, to write a book that was going to be a book that people can understand. You ain't got to pull your dictionary out to understand what I'm talking about. I wanted to be the guide for people to help them get through this mental health crisis that they may or may not be having. I wanted to be somebody who could serve as a buffer from the school textbooks to the Black community. Because, when I was in school, we was reading through all these psychology books and whatnot. And I knew back then none of it resonated with me. Like, where are the books that talk about the Black folks? And I knew way back then that it needed to be more Black mental health books. I just had no idea that I was going to be the one to write it.
Yeah, well, they say if you have a book that you always wanted to read, it means you got to be the person to write it.
Yep, that's in the book. The first quote when you open up Black Mental Health Matters, a quote by Maya Angelou.
Yep. And so I know, I won't hold you too much longer, but this book, to be honest with you, like this book is one of the reasons why the Black Book Club exists.
Mm.
Is because I wanted to be a buffer to my people, people in our culture and the kind of books they need, because we see the mainstream books that are, praised and things like that. And I've always wanted to be somebody that can say, okay, well, look at this book because I know you'll need this book.
Yeah.
And so this book is one of the reasons why, why I do what I do. It's one of the reasons why I want to put, free libraries in our communities. And because of this book, because I want you to be able to get this book so that it can enrich your life. It can help your life. Like the young man that came to see me, it can change your life. You know what I mean? So I appreciate this book. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's a book that I've read at least twice. I've highlighted. I've given to my family because it's that important to me. And I want you to know that as the author of the book, I just want to tell you that this book really, really helped my family and it helped the family of people who I've given it to as well.
I appreciate that, my brother. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
No problem at all. And I mean that. Like, we always say people give people flowers while they can smell them.
Mm.
This book is one of those ones. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, for sure.
No problem at all. So yeah, we got to get you back here when the journaling book comes out. We got to get you back here to talk about that in some more detail.
Okay, yeah, for sure. It should be dropping within the next 2 weeks. I'm just trying to figure out a specific date, get all the business end of things taken care of. And once that happens, I'm gonna make a post, but I'm gonna let you know ahead of time, and then we'll set something up.
Definitely, definitely. We'll get you back on here, brother. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, bro.
All right, we'll talk to you real soon.
All right, take care.
All right, my man.
All right, bro.
Oh, wait. That was my man, Aaren Snyder. Like I said, the author of Black Mental Health Matters. We have the book on the blackbookclub.net. I see a few people saying let them go find it. It's one of the best books that I've read. I was about to say written. I didn't write none of this, but it's one of the best books that I've read. It came at a time that I really needed it, and it really helps me. It didn't help me. It helps me still because I go back to it. I highlight places. I underline some things. So I go back to it very often because, like I said, we're still in a pandemic. I'm a Black father of two. I'm a husband. So we all have mental health things that we're dealing with. We all have trauma that we're dealing with. And we're all just trying to be better, right? We're trying to be better people, parents, spouses, everything. So this is a book I suggest to anybody. So I really appreciate everybody joining me today for Quality Time. We'll come back very soon. Like I said, we'll have Aaren Snyder back on very soon as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining.